in the heart of New Zealand's North Island, where the ocean meets dense forests and the spirits of ancestors whisper in the wind, one of the first chapters of colonial struggle unfolded. This is the story of the Northern War, also known as the Flagstaff War or Hohenheek's Rebellion, 1845 to 1846, an era when Britain's imperial ambitions clashed with the unyielding spirit of the Maori. At the center of this drama stands Te Ruki Kawiti, the legendary chief of the Ngati Haine tribe, a brilliant strategist and defender of his land. His name, meaning the hand that grasps, became a symbol of resistance. But to understand this war, we must go back to its roots, to the preconditions that built up over years, like clouds before a storm. New Zealand in the early 19th century was a land of contrasts. The Maori, the indigenous people, lived in harmony with nature, in tribes bound by blood, traditions, and warfare. Their culture featured the art of tomoko tattoos and fortified pa villages, where warriors defended their territories. But the arrival of Europeans, first missionaries, whalers, and traders, changed everything. The 1790s, initial contacts with British, French, and American visitors. The Maori adapted quickly, trading food and resources for muskets, piaku, as they called them. This weaponry transformed intertribal conflicts into bloody campaigns known as the Musket Wars, 1818 to 1839. It was during this time that Te Ruki Kawiti was born, around the 1770s, in the northern region, in the Bay of Islands area. He descended from the lineages of Rahiri and Nukutawiti, ancestors from the legendary Kanu Ngado Aotearoa. From childhood, Kawiti was raised as a warrior. Lessons in marksmanship, strategy, and diplomacy. His mentor was Hongi Hika, the great chief of Ngapuhi, who taught Kawiti the art of war. Kawiti quickly proved himself in battles. 1807 to 1808, the Battle of Moramaniwai, where Ngapuhi, armed with muskets, clashed with Ngati Wachua. It was a disaster for Ngapuhi, hundreds dead, including Hongi's brothers. Kawiti survived, but the lesson stuck. Technology does not replace strategy. Later, in 1825, at the Battle of Te Aotearoa, Ngapuhi avenged themselves, taking prisoners. Kawiti, related to some of them, returned them home, showing mercy that contrasted with Hongi's ruthlessness. But the true preconditions of the war lay in colonization. The 1830s, Britain strengthens its influence. James Busby, the first British resident, arrives in 1833, attempting to regulate trade and protect the Maori from lawlessness. Kawiti, now an experienced chief, watched this with suspicion. The culmination was the Treaty of Waitangi, signed on February 6, 1840. Governor William Hobson represented the Crown, promising protection and rights to the Maori in exchange for sovereignty. But the translation was ambiguous. The British saw it as full authority, the Maori as a partnership where Tino Rangatiratanga, chiefly authority, was preserved. Kawiti initially refused to sign, but in May 1840, after reflection, he did so, placing his mark first, a gesture of pride. After the treaty, changes came swiftly. The capital moved from Russell, Kororareka, to Auckland in 1841, hurting Ngapuhi trade. Customs duties reduced profits from maritime commerce. The British flag on Mikey Hill, gifted by Kawiti and Heek to Busby, became a symbol of enslavement. American traders, sharing stories of revolutions, inspired Hohenheek, Kawiti's nephew. Ordinary people felt this deeply. Consider the story of a young warrior named Tamati, a typical Maori from Kawiti's tribe. He worked at whaling stations, trading goods for tools. But with duties, trade declined, and Tamati lost his livelihood. His emotions, anger, helplessness, mirrored the mood of many. By 1844, tension peaked. Hohenheek, inspired by Kawiti, decided to act. July 8, 1844, the first felling of the flagstaff Te Ruki by Heek's servant. It was a challenge. The British restored it, but January 10, 1845, the second felling by Heek himself. The third, January 19, despite iron reinforcements. Kawiti, in his 70s, supported it. As a senior Rangataira, he planned the strategy, knowing war was inevitable. Governor Robert Fitzroy, and later George Grey, saw this as rebellion. British forces, soldiers from the 58th and 96th Regiments, sailors from HMS Hazard, prepared. The Maori divided. Tamati Wakanene and Ruapekapeka supported the British, believing the treaty was the path to peace. But for Kawiti and Heek, it was a matter of honor. Kawiti, with experience from the musket wars, built Pa with artillery in mind. Deep trenches, wooden fortifications that absorbed bullets. His genius lay in adapting traditional defenses to modern warfare. These preconditions were not just events, but a clash of cultures. Britain, at the height of empire, viewed New Zealand as a colony for expansion. The Maori, with a 1,000-year history, fought for autonomy. Emotionally, it was a war for the nation's soul, fear of losing identity against the greed for power. The fates of ordinary people, like Tamati, were tragic. Many would become victims, their families torn apart. Thus the stage was set, the flagstaff fell, and with it, illusions of peace. In the moment when the flagstaff on Mikey Hill fell for the third time, the air in the Bay of Islands was thick with tension, like before a tropical storm. March 1845. Hone Heek, the young and fiery chief, stood beside his uncle Te Ruki Kawiti, watching as the British symbol of authority lay in the dust. This was not just an act of vandalism. It was a challenge to the empire. Governor Robert Fitzroy, outraged, declared martial law and sent troops to Kororareka, the old capital where European settlers had established themselves. Kawiti, in his 70s, with a face covered in tattoos that told stories of battles and victories, knew war was inevitable. He gathered his warriors from the Ngati Hine tribe and allies from Gapuhi, preparing for defense. His strategy was simple yet brilliant. Use knowledge of the land, traditional Pa fortifications adapted for muskets and artillery, and guerrilla tactics to exhaust the enemy. The first major clash unfolded in Kororareka, known to Europeans as Russell. March 11, 1845. British forces, under Lieutenant Philpotts from HMS Hazard, landed to restore order. They had 200 soldiers, sailors, and local militiamen, armed with muskets, cannons, and even ship guns. On the Maori side, about 250 warriors led by Heek and Kawiti. Kawiti, experienced from the musket wars, divided his forces. Some attacked from the front, others from the flanks, using dense forest for cover. The Maori warriors, many veterans, hid behind earthen ramparts, firing from fortifications. The British, accustomed to European battles in open fields, did not expect such resistance. The battle lasted the entire day. The Maori captured the blockhouse, forcing the British to evacuate to their ships. Kororareka burned. Houses in flames, smoke rising over the bay. The British lost 20 killed and 23 wounded, the Maori about 34 killed. This was a victory for Kawiti and Heek, but bittersweet. Among the dead were their relatives. This battle showed that the Maori were not mere savages. They were organized, disciplined fighters. After Kororareka, the British regrouped. Fitzroy was replaced by the more decisive George Grey, who arrived in November 1845, but by then the war had escalated. Kawiti and Heek retreated inland, building new Pa. The next key event, the Battle of Puketapu, May 8, 1845. This was an attack on Heek's Pa near Lake Omapir. British forces, now under Colonel Daypard, had 400 men, including allied Maori led by Tamati Wakanene. Nene, a rival of Heek, saw the British as allies against internal enemies. Puketapu was a fortress, deep ditches, wooden palisades that withstood bullets. Kawiti assisted in its construction, advising on making the walls thick to resist cannons. The British attacked at dawn, but the Maori met them with fire. Daypard, underestimating the resistance, ordered an assault. Soldiers climbed the ramparts but fell under gunfire. The Maori lost few, the British 13 killed and 40 wounded. Heek and Kawiti retreated at night, leaving the Pa empty. It was a tactical victory for the British, but a strategic one for the Maori, as they preserved their forces. Summer 1845 brought escalation. Kawiti, now the chief strategist, built a Pa at Ohaeawai, a masterpiece of engineering. Ohaeawai sat on a hill, with 3 lines of palisades, underground tunnels for evacuation, and storage for ammunition. The warriors, about 100, were armed with muskets captured at Kororareka. The British, with 600 men and artillery, approached on June 23. Depard, confident in his superiority, bombarded the Pa, but the wooden walls absorbed the shells. The assault on July 1 became a disaster. The British charged the ramparts, but the Māori, hiding in ditches, fired at point-blank range. The British lost 41 killed and 70 wounded, their heaviest losses in the war. The Māori lost only 10. Depard retreated, humiliated. For Kawiti, this was a pinnacle. His tactics proved the empire was not invincible. But emotionally, it was heavy. Among the Māori dead was his relative, a reminder of the cost. Ordinary people suffered the most. Consider a Māori farmer named Hira, who did not fight, but his village was burned by British allies. He lost his crops, livestock, and now fled into the forest with his family. Settlers, too. Many evacuated from the north, losing property. The region's economy halted, trade collapsed. In the autumn, the war shifted to Ruapekapeka, the last Pa of Kawiti. It was even more complex. Multi-kilometer ditches, underground bunkers where warriors could hide from bombardments. Gray, the new governor, assembled 1,300 men, including artillery and Congreve rockets. The attack began in December 1845. Bombardments lasted days, but Kawiti held firm. As the bombardment echoed through the valleys of the North Island, the Northern War reached its fever pitch at Ruapekapeka, the Bat's Nest, Te Ruki Kawiti's final masterpiece of fortification. January 1846. This Pa, perched on a rugged hill near Koakoa, was unlike any before it. A labyrinth of trenches stretching over a kilometer, reinforced palisades that could withstand cannon fire, and underground bunkers where warriors could shelter from the relentless shelling. Kawiti, the aging strategist, had designed it with precision drawn from decades of warfare, incorporating lessons from Ohaeawai and Puketapu. His force numbered around 400 to 500 Māori warriors, armed with muskets, spears, and unyielding resolve. They faced Governor George Grey's assembled army of over 1,300 men. British regulars from the 58th and 99th Regiments, Royal Marines, Colonial Militia, and Allied Māori under Tamati Wakanene. Grey brought heavy artillery, 32-pounder naval guns, howitzers, and Congreve rockets, symbols of imperial might. The siege began on December 31, 1845, as British forces established positions around the Pa. Grey's strategy was methodical: encircle, bombard, and starve the defenders. For days, the air filled with the thunder of cannons, shells cratering the earth, but failing to breach the inner defenses. Kawiti's men fired back sporadically, conserving ammunition, their chants and war cries piercing the smoke to boost morale. Inside the Pa, the atmosphere was one of grim determination mixed with exhaustion. Warriors like young Riri's comrades from earlier battles now huddled in damp tunnels, sharing meager rations of fern root and dried fish. Families, including women and children who had sought refuge, endured the constant fear. One mother, clutching her infant amid the explosions, whispered prayers to the ancestors for protection. Kawiti moved among them, his voice steady. He knew the Pa was built not just to hold but to bleed the enemy of time and resources. By January 10, 1846, the bombardment intensified. Grey ordered a massive assault, but first his engineers sapped forward, digging trenches to approach the outer palisades. Rockets streaked across the sky, setting parts of the Pa ablaze, yet the Māori repaired damages under cover of night. Tensions peaked when, on the morning of January 11th, a Sunday, the British discovered the Pa seemingly abandoned. Scouts reported no activity. Many Māori had left to observe the Sabbath in a nearby clearing, adhering to Christian influences from missionaries. Seizing the opportunity, Grey's forces advanced cautiously. Allied Māori under Nene led the charge, clashing with the few guards left behind. Gunfire erupted as Kawiti's warriors rushed back, turning the breach into a chaotic melee. The fighting was fierce in close quarters, bayonets against taiha clubs, muskets at point-blank range. British soldiers stormed the outer trenches, only to face hidden rifle pits where Maori defenders picked them off one by one. Kawiti, directing from the center, orchestrated ambushes that inflicted heavy casualties. One British officer, Lieutenant Balnives, fell wounded, his men dragging him back under fire. On the Maori side, losses mounted. Estimates suggest 12 to 20 killed, including key warriors whose deaths sowed seeds of doubt. Honhik, fighting alongside Kawiti, was injured but pressed on, his earlier defiance now tempered by the reality of defeat. The battle raged for hours, the ground slick with blood and mud from recent rains. By afternoon, the British overran the Pa. Kawiti and Heek orchestrated an orderly retreat through pre-planned escape routes in the rear, melting into the surrounding bush with most of their force intact. Gray claimed victory, his troops raising the Union Jack over the ruins, but it was Pyrrhic. British and Allied losses totaled around 45 killed and 65 wounded, while the Maori had evaded total destruction. Ruapekapeka's fall marked the war's climax, not a decisive crush of the rebellion, but a testament to Maori resilience. Kawiti's fortifications had forced the empire to expend vast resources, exposing the limits of colonial power against determined indigenous defense. Emotionally, this peak was shattering for all involved. For the Maori, it was a moment of profound loss mingled with pride. Warriors who survived carried scars, both physical and spiritual, mourning comrades whose bodies lay unburied in the haste of retreat. Ordinary people, like the farmer Hira from earlier skirmishes, saw their land scarred by war, their neutrality ignored as villages were looted. On the British side, soldiers grappled with the horror of the assault. Many young recruits from distant shores questioned the cost of empire, their letters home filled with tales of savage, yet ingenious foes. Gray, ever the pragmatist, recognized that military might alone wouldn't secure peace. He began contemplating negotiations. The climax at Ruapekapeka shifted the war's momentum. With their strongest Pa lost, Kawiti and Heek dispersed their forces, turning to guerrilla harassment, but the end was near. This battle underscored the themes of the conflict: innovation versus tradition, imperialism versus sovereignty. It was the emotional and strategic zenith, where the unyielding hand of Kawiti grasped at freedom one last time before the inevitable reckoning. In the aftermath of Ruapekapeka's fall, the smoke cleared over the scarred hills of the North Island, revealing a landscape forever altered by conflict. January 1846 marked not just the end of major battles, but the beginning of a painful reckoning for both sides in the Northern War. Te Ruki Kawiti and Honhik, having evaded capture, retreated deeper into Maori-controlled territories with their remaining warriors. Governor George Gray, proclaiming victory, ordered his forces to dismantle the Pa, destroying its intricate fortifications as a symbol of British dominance. Yet, this victory came at a steep price. The British had expended thousands of pounds, lost dozens of lives, and exposed the vulnerabilities of their colonial strategy. For the Maori, the consequences were immediate and profound. Loss of land, shattered communities, and a re-evaluation of resistance in the face of overwhelming imperial power. The immediate military fallout was swift. Gray, pragmatic and calculating, chose not to pursue Kawiti and Heek aggressively, recognizing that further fighting could ignite wider unrest among other tribes. Instead, he initiated peace overtures. By late January, emissaries approached the Maori leaders, offering terms that avoided total subjugation. Kawiti, ever the strategist, weighed his options from hiding. His forces were depleted, ammunition low, and the wet summer weather had turned the bush into a harsh refuge. Heek, wounded and weary, shared the sentiment. On March 1st, 1846, a tentative peace was brokered at the Pa of Tamati Wakanene in Ohaeawai. Kawiti and Heek surrendered no arms and faced no trials. Gray granted a general pardon, acknowledging the Maori's honorable fight. This leniency was strategic. Gray aimed to divide and pacify, rewarding loyalists like Nene with land grants while isolating rebels. Economically, the war devastated the Bay of Islands region. Kororareka, once a bustling hub of whaling and trade, lay in ruins, its European population halved as settlers fled south to Auckland. Maori agriculture suffered too. Fields left untended during the fighting led to food shortages, exacerbating hunger in communities already strained by the musket war's legacy. Trade routes, vital for muskets and goods, were disrupted, forcing tribes like Ngati Hine to rely on subsistence farming. Kawiti, returning to his lands near Waiomio, found his own pod damaged and resources scarce. He focused on rebuilding, directing his people to plant kamara and repair ware, but the emotional toll was evident. Widows and orphans wandered the villages, their grief a constant reminder of the dead. Socially, the consequences rippled through Maori society. The war deepened divisions within Gapuhi. Allies like Nene gained favor and influence, receiving crown lands and titles, while Kawiti and Heke were marginalized, their authority challenged by internal rivals. This factionalism weakened collective Maori resistance, setting a precedent for future conflicts like the Waikato Wars. For ordinary people, the impact was deeply personal. Take the widow of a warrior fallen at Ruapekapeka. Her husband gone, she struggled to raise children amid the uncertainty, bartering what little she had for survival. Emotions ran high. Resentment toward the British mingled with regret over the war's cost, fostering a sense of betrayal among those who had trusted the Treaty of Waitangi. European settlers, meanwhile, harbored fear and bitterness, viewing all Maori with suspicion, which fueled calls for more military presence and land seizures. Politically, the war prompted shifts in colonial policy. Grey used the conflict to justify increased British control, requesting more troops from London, and implementing the Wastelands Act of 1846, which allowed the Crown to claim and use Maori lands. This accelerated alienation, with thousands of acres in the north confiscated as punishment, though Grey returned some to loyal tribes to maintain alliances. Kawiti, negotiating from strength despite defeat, secured protections for his people's holdings, but many others lost ancestral territories. The war also highlighted the treaty's flaws. Maori grievances over sovereignty went unaddressed, sowing seeds for the New Zealand wars that would erupt in the 1860s. In Britain, reports of the conflict stirred debate. Some praised Grey's efficiency, others criticized the heavy-handed approach, questioning the ethics of colonial expansion. On a human level, the consequences touched every stratum. British soldiers, many of whom had endured the horrors of trench warfare and ambushes, returned to barracks with physical wounds and haunting memories. One veteran, writing in his journal, described the feudal bravery of the Maori, his admiration tempered by the loss of comrades. For Maori youth, the war became a rite of passage turned tragedy. Survivors like those who fought under Kawiti carried stories of heroism, but also trauma that influenced generations. Communities rebuilt slowly, with missionaries like Henry Williams mediating disputes, yet trust eroded. Kawiti himself, in his later years, reflected on the war as a necessary stand. He lived until 1854, dying at Waiomio, his legacy preserved in oral histories that emphasized his tactical brilliance over defeat. The Northern War's consequences extended beyond the immediate, reshaping alliances, economies, and identities. It marked the transition from early colonial friction to systematic dispossession, where military might gave way to legal maneuvers. Emotionally, it left a nation divided, pride and resistance for the Maori, a sobering lesson in conquest for the British. As peace settled uneasily, the true cost emerged in the quiet struggles of the people, their lives forever changed by the clash at Ruapekapeka. As the echoes of gunfire faded from the hills of Ruapekapeka, the Northern War left an indelible mark on New Zealand's soul, shaping its legacy in ways that resonate through history, culture, and identity. Te Ruki Kawiti, the unyielding chief whose strategies humbled an empire, became a symbol of Maori resilience, his name invoked in tales of resistance long after his death in 1854. The war, though short, was a pivotal chapter in the broader New Zealand wars, influencing land rights, governance, and the ongoing dialogue between Maori and Pakeha. Its legacy is multifaceted, a testament to tactical innovation, a catalyst for legal reforms, and a source of cultural revival, all woven into the fabric of a nation's evolving narrative. Militarily, Kawiti's fortifications revolutionized indigenous warfare. His pa designs, multi-layered palisades, deep trenches, and underground shelters, demonstrated how traditional Maori engineering could counter European artillery, inspiring later defenses in conflicts like the Waikato and Taranaki Wars. Historians credit Kawiti with proving that asymmetric warfare could challenge colonial forces, forcing Britain to adapt tactics and invest heavily in sieges. This legacy extended globally. Accounts of the Northern War influenced military thinkers, highlighting the pitfalls of underestimating local knowledge. For the British Army, it was a humbling lesson. Reports back to London emphasized the need for better intelligence and respect for native ingenuity, subtly shifting imperial strategies in other colonies. Culturally, the war amplified Maori pride and unity. Kawiti and Hohenheek stand against the flagstaff symbolize the fight for Tino Rangatiratanga, chiefly authority, enshrined in the Treaty of Waitangi. In oral histories and Waiata songs, Kawiti is portrayed as a guardian spirit, his grasping hand clutching the essence of Maori sovereignty. The conflict spurred a renaissance in Maori arts. Carvings and tattoos depicting battle scenes preserve the stories, ensuring younger generations remembered the cost of colonization. Today, sites like Ruapekapeka are heritage landmarks, managed by the Department of Conservation and iwi tribes, where visitors trace the trenches and reflect on the human drama. Annual commemorations blend solemnity with education, fostering reconciliation through shared narratives. Politically and legally, the legacy drove reforms that redefined New Zealand's trajectory. The war exposed the treaty's ambiguities, leading to the 1852 Constitution Act, which established a settler-dominated parliament, but also prompted early calls for Maori representation. Kawiti's pardon and Gray's leniency set precedents for post-conflict amnesties, avoiding total alienation. However, land confiscations, Rapatu, intensified grievances, fueling the Kingatanga movement and later wars. In the 20th century, this legacy fueled the Maori Renaissance. The 1975 Treaty of Waitangi Act established the Waitangi Tribunal, which has addressed Northern war claims, awarding compensation to Ngati Hain descendants for lost lands. Kawiti's Wana family have been central to these proceedings, reclaiming cultural taona, treasures, and advocating for co-governance models that echo his vision of partnership. Socially, the war's impact on ordinary lives endures in stories of endurance and loss. Descendants of warriors like those under Kawiti carry intergenerational trauma, disrupted Wakapapa genealogy, economic disparities, and health issues tied to dispossession. Yet, it also birthed empowerment. Maori leaders today draw on Kawiti's example and activism, from a 1975 land march to modern protests over water rights. For Pakeha, the legacy prompts reflection on colonial history. Schools incorporate the Northern War into curricula, promoting bicultural understanding to heal divides. Emotionally, it's a bittersweet inheritance, pride and defiance tempered by sorrow for the fallen, as seen in memorials where families gather to honor ancestors. Economically, the war's shadow lingered in the North's development. The Bay of Islands recovered slowly, but the shift of capital to Auckland entrenched southern dominance, marginalizing northern iwi. Modern tourism, however, leverages the legacy. Battlefield tours and museums generate revenue for Maori communities, turning sites of conflict into sources of empowerment. Kawiti's home at Waiomio Caves, now a visitor center, blends history with ecology, symbolizing adaptation. The Northern War's legacy transcends New Zealand, contributing to global indigenous rights discourse. It parallels struggles like the American Indian Wars or Australian Frontier Wars, underscoring themes of sovereignty and resilience. In international forums, Maori cite Kawiti's story to advocate for UN declarations on indigenous peoples. Ultimately, this legacy is living, evolving through dialogue, restitution, and remembrance, ensuring the hand that grasps continues to hold firm. In the twilight of New Zealand's colonial dawn, the Northern War stands as a profound testament to the clash of worlds, where the indomitable spirit of Te Ruki Kawiti illuminated the path of resistance against the inexorable tide of empire. As we draw this chronicle to a close, reflecting on the journey from preconditions to legacy, the war emerges not merely as a series of battles, but as a defining moment that forged a nation's identity, bridging past grievances with future aspirations for justice and harmony. Kawiti's story, woven through the fabric of this conflict, encapsulates the essence of Maori endurance. Born in an era of transformation, he rose as a warrior scholar, adapting ancient tactics to modern threats, his pa fortifications a metaphor for unyielding defense. The war's prelude in the Treaty of Waitangi's ambiguities set the stage for betrayal. Its main events showcased tactical brilliance at Kororareka, Ohaeawai, and beyond. The climax at Ruapekapeka tested the limits of resolve. Consequences reshaped societies through loss and division, and the legacy endures in cultural revival, legal restitution, and global indigenous narratives. Emotionally, it evokes a spectrum, from the raw anguish of fallen warriors and displaced families to the quiet pride and sovereignty asserted. Analytically, the Northern War underscores timeless themes: the fragility of treaties in the face of power imbalances, the ingenuity of the oppressed, and the long shadow of colonialism. Britain's victory was hollow, costing far more in resources and reputation than anticipated, while Maori losses in lives and lands fueled a resilient quest for equity. Kawiti's pardon and subsequent life until 1854 symbolized not defeat, but strategic survival, his influence echoing in descendants who champion treaty principles today. In conclusion, this war was a crucible that tempered New Zealand's bicultural foundation. It reminds us that history is not static, but a living dialogue, where the voices of ancestors like Kawiti urge reconciliation. As the winds whisper over the Bay of Islands, the lessons remain: honor the past, embrace equity, and grasp the future with the same firm hand that once defied an empire.